Sergeant Caleb Ward was nearing the end of his rotation on Piraeus 9, a desolate moon on the far reaches of Terran-controlled space. It was the kind of place people forgot, where rusted outposts were manned by tired soldiers guarding nothing in particular, just a line on a map no one really cared about anymore. Caleb had grown used to the silence, to the endless dunes and the whisper of wind against steel walls. So, when he received a minor seismic alert near the outer sensor perimeter, he didn't expect anything. Maybe a minor landslide or some leftover mine drone acting up again. Instead, he found her, half buried in sand, barely conscious, with shackles. That buzzed faintly with alien tech. The woman didn't belong to any species in the Terran database. Her skin was a pale shimmer, almost translucent in the sun, and the long crest of faintly glowing hair down her back fluttered even without wind. But what struck Caleb most were her eyes. They were huge, silvery, and unmistakably human in one way. They were filled with fear. He approached slowly, weapon lowered. She didn't speak, didn't resist. She didn't even flinch as he scanned her with his field kit. No weapons, malnourished, internal injuries. Every reading screamed trafficked, captive, though the data couldn't say where from. Protocol demanded he call this in. Capture, containment, report. Let command deal with it. But Caleb had seen what command did to unknowns, especially when they were weak and alien. They disappeared. No trial, no questions. Just a convenient silence in the records. And Caleb, for all his years in service, had grown tired of silence. So he broke the rules. He lifted her gently and brought her back to his outpost. Not through the front, but through the forgotten crawl space behind the old comms relay, place no one checked anymore. She barely moved the whole time. He laid her in a disused supply crate outfitted with padding and warmth, rationed his food, cleaned her wounds, gave her water in slow, careful sips. She looked at him with wary disbelief, as if unable to comprehend kindness. Caleb didn't ask questions, didn't push. He simply sat nearby and offered warmth, safety, and time. On the second day, she stirred more. Her hands, long and elegant, traced patterns in the dust. At first random, then deliberate. Circles, constellations, then shapes that mirrored. Maps he remembered from navigation charts. She was intelligent. Highly so. He wondered how long she'd been in captivity. What she'd seen. Who had owned her. She began watching him closely, mirroring his movements. When he drank, she drank. When he chewed, she copied. Her gaze lingered not on his weapons, but on his hands, the same hands that had unlocked her chains. That night, she took a piece of metal scrap and scratched something into the floor, a single curved symbol. Caleb didn't know what it meant, but he memorized it anyway. By the third day, she made sounds. Not words, at least not any Terran language, but tones, a kind of melodic hum. It changed depending on what she was doing. Soft and slow when she ate, sharp and short when she was startled. It wasn't random. It was language. Caleb tried speaking slowly to her in standard Terran. She tilted her head, listening, mimicking sounds like a child learning for the first time. Progress. On the fourth morning, Caleb brought her food and found the crate empty. No sign of forced exit. No struggle. Just the faint outline of her body in the blankets. And her shackles, neatly folded on top. She was gone. Caleb searched the area, scanning for biosigns, footprints, anything. But the dunes had already erased her trail. The sensors had been disabled intentionally and with skill. She had left by choice. He returned to duty in a fog, kept his silence, wrote the seismic alert off as a glitch. No one questioned him. Who cared about sensor flickers on a dead moon? But deep down something gnawed at Caleb. He hadn't saved her. He had simply opened a door. Whatever happened next, wherever she went, was out of his hands, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this story wasn't over, not by a long shot. 8 days had passed since the alien woman vanished without a trace. Caleb Ward tried to go about his daily routine, but he couldn't shake the memory of her eyes, the way they had changed from fear to something almost like peace. He had done what he thought was right, but a voice in the back of his mind kept whispering, "What if they find her again? What if she doesn't make it this time?" Then the ship arrived. It began with a perimeter alarm. A Class Z alert, not a pirate ping, not smuggler interference, but something stranger. Unidentified vessel entering restricted airspace. No transponder, no IFF beacon, no known propulsion signature. The command center panicked. Parias 9 was not a high-value target. No one should have cared about it, let alone shown up with a ship that looked like it had come from another era, or another civilization entirely. The ship hovered in place just outside the eastern ridge, matte black with faint blue sigils glowing along its hull. Its surface was oddly organic, sleek, curved, almost alive. No weapons were visible. No shields activated. It simply landed. Outpost security scrambled into position. Weapons powered. Mechs deployed. Caleb stood on the edge of the landing zone, hand on his sidearm, unsure whether to expect an attack or a miracle. Then she stepped out. The alien woman, no longer bruised or starved, walked down the ship's ramp wearing ceremonial armor that shimmered in the sunlight. It was unlike anything Caleb had seen, layered like scales, but made of bone-like crystal. Pulses of soft bioluminescence danced across it, flowing in rhythm with her steps. Behind her walked 2 taller figures, guards clearly, but they didn't seem aggressive. They flanked her like bodyguards escorting a queen. Caleb stared, stunned. She was radiant, graceful, commanding. She was nothing like the shackled figure he'd found in the sand. She raised a hand, palm open, and spoke. Her voice, deep and melodic, echoed in perfect Terran standard. "I am Alira, daughter of the Ashari Ascendant. The human Caleb Ward spared my life. I returned not as a fugitive, but as a herald." The gathered soldiers froze. The name Ashari sent ripples through the crowd. One of the lost empires, rumored to have vanished from galactic history millennia ago. Some considered them myth. Caleb stepped forward, uncertain. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since he had freed her, she smiled. "You showed mercy. You gave without asking. You reminded us of something long buried." With a wave of her hand, the 2 figures behind her brought forth a small object, carried with reverence in a containment field. It looked like a silver orb, faintly humming, covered in fractal patterns that shifted when viewed from different angles. The air around it shimmered faintly. "This is a seed of Scythin," Alira said, "one of our rarest living relics. It purifies, it heals, it grows. It was not meant for war, but for rebirth." The outpost science officer, Dr. Shen, stepped forward cautiously, scanning the orb. He blinked in disbelief. "This thing, it's alive, and its output is exponential. It's synthesizing complex organics in real time. This can't be real." Alira turned back to Caleb, speaking with quiet certainty. "We offer this gift to Earth, not for diplomacy nor debt, but in recognition of a single act of mercy. No empire has received what you have, not in centuries." Then she said the words that would later echo through every diplomatic channel in the galaxy. "The Ashari do not forget." With that, she and her guards returned to the ship, leaving the orb and silence behind. The vessel lifted without sound and vanished into the upper atmosphere faster than radar could track. What followed was chaos. Command tried to seize the orb. Earth's Central Science Division issued Priority 1 directives. Every Terran power civilian and military alike, suddenly cared very much about what Caleb had done, but no one could deny the truth. Something alien, powerful, and utterly benevolent had chosen him. Not Earth, not the Terran Alliance. Him, Caleb didn't want fame, he didn't want promotion. He only wanted to understand why her, why the seed, and why now. But deep down, he already knew compassion, given without expectation, had been recognized by a species so ancient it had outlived empires. And now Earth humanity had been noticed by beings far greater than they had ever imagined, and it all began with a single act of kindness, and a freed prisoner who had returned as royalty. The seed of Sifin became Earth's greatest mystery overnight. Carried in a sealed containment field, the small silver orb now sat inside a Level 0 secure research facility on Parias 9, surrounded by dozens of the Terran Alliance's top scientists, linguists, and engineers. The best minds were brought in, but all their instruments gave them the same answer. This thing defied every known law of biology, chemistry, and physics. Its surface pulsed gently with energy, fractal designs shifting in real time across its curved shell. It wasn't just alive, it was aware. When researchers approached, the patterns changed. When words were spoken near it, especially in Alira's voice, which had been recorded during her brief appearance, the seed responded with harmonic vibrations that were eventually translated into structured patterns. Caleb Ward, meanwhile, found himself swept into a torrent of diplomatic chaos. Suddenly he was Earth's liaison to a species no one had heard from in thousands of years. His quiet posting had become the most secure and important site in human-controlled space. Every ambassador, every high-ranking official wanted access, wanted answers, and they all traced back to him. But Caleb didn't have answers. All he had was a memory of a woman in chains, of a moment where he chose humanity over orders. And now the galaxy wanted to know why he had been chosen. Dr. Shen was the first to discover the seed's potential. After a few days of careful exposure to various materials, it began to replicate clean water from even the most contaminated samples. Then it synthesized soil-enriching compounds entirely on its own. Within a week, they planted test crops in the barren sand near the outpost. By the third day, the first sprout had emerged. By the seventh, they had an entire field of wheat untouched by pests, nourished without fertilizer, growing at 10 times normal speed. It wasn't just agriculture. The seed began producing aerosolized molecules that, when inhaled, reduced inflammation, boosted immunity, and corrected minor genetic defects. Injuries healed faster. Soldiers who had battled chronic illnesses saw their symptoms vanish. One man's blindness reversed entirely. What made it even stranger was that the seed seemed to know what each person needed. Its energy fields fluctuated slightly when certain individuals approached. Caleb, in particular, triggered a bright, harmonic pulse every time he stepped into the room, as if it recognized him. And still, no one fully understood how it worked. Attempts to scan, dissect, or even X-ray the seed yielded nothing. Every instrument passed through it as if it wasn't fully there. The only thing that provoked a visible change was language spoken with intention, requests made calmly, kindly, and with clear meaning. It had limits. It would not respond to commands. It would not replicate weapons or be used for destruction. Attempts to hack it with AI requests resulted in complete silence from the orb, but when asked softly to help cleanse the planet's atmosphere, it began releasing microscopic particles into the air, which bonded with carbon emissions and rendered them inert. News spread like wildfire. Other Earth outposts, upon receiving seed-generated nutrients and purifiers, saw desert worlds bloom. Water reclaimed from toxic oceans. Diseases wiped out in days. The Earth homeworld initiated full-scale distribution of seed tech derivatives. By the end of the month, famine was eliminated in 3 megacities. By the end of the quarter, entire continents were transforming, but with the miracle came unease. Why? Had this been given so freely? Why had the Asharia race believed to have vanished from galactic affairs chosen now to reappear? And why had they chosen Caleb Ward? Theories flooded in. Conspiracy boards exploded. Was the seed a Trojan horse? Was Caleb unknowingly altered? Was this the first step in some interstellar manipulation? But those closest to the project knew better. They had seen the Ashari ship, heard Alira's voice, and witnessed the seed's absolute refusal to harm. There was no invasion. This was not a gift of conquest. It was a response to compassion. When Alira had returned, she hadn't asked for anything. She'd simply said one thing: the Ashari do not forget. Now Earth was beginning to understand what that meant. Caleb remained quiet through it all. He attended briefings, answered what he could, but more often than not, he chose to walk the green fields growing just outside the outpost. Fields that hadn't existed a month ago, he watched. Rabbits return. Birds fly. Flowers bloom where once there was only dust, and he realized something simple, but profound. The universe had watched humanity for centuries, measuring them by their wars, their greed, their ambition. But one alien woman, broken and bound, had seen something different, and that one moment when he chose mercy had rewritten the future. The changes started subtly at first. Within a month of the seed of Scythian being activated, not just Earth, but the entire Terran Alliance began to feel the ripples. The seed's effects were undeniable. Crops growing in once dead soil, clean. Water flowing in industrial wastelands, and air so pure even the older Earth cities long written off as unfixable began to see the stars again. But something else changed, too. Across the galactic frontier, incidents that had plagued humanity. For decades, pirate attacks, border skirmishes, rogue AI incursions started vanishing without explanation. Enemy fleets that had been massing along the Perseus expanse suddenly broke formation and withdrew. Mercenary groups that had once hunted Terran settlers for a price now refused such contracts altogether and scattered across intercepted alien communications. Came a strange new phrase: Earth is marked by the Ashari. To strike them is to strike death itself. That single line, echoing across hundreds of channels, changed everything. No one quite knew what marked meant. Not even Earth's greatest scholars had reliable information about the Ashari, only fragments of myth, stories whispered by older civilizations. According to those legends, the Ashari were not conquerors, but custodians, ancient guardians of balance who withdrew from galactic affairs after watching countless empires crumble due to cruelty, greed, and war. For thousands of years, they had remained silent. Until Caleb Ward freed one of their own. Until Alira returned with a gift meant only for those the Ashari deemed worthy. And now it seemed the galaxy feared them again, not for their weapons, but for what their favor implied. Fear and reverence spread. Alien diplomats began contacting Earth's embassies, not with threats or ultimatums, but with reverent caution. Some even offered unasked for trade deals, mineral-rich worlds, and long-held technologies, all in exchange for access to whatever blessing the humans had received. But when asked directly, Alira had been clear. The seed was not a tool of politics. It had not been given to Earth's government. It had been given to Caleb. We deal not in treaties. We deal in truths, she'd said during her second and final visit. The Terran named Caleb Ward chose mercy when no one else would. The seed honors that. The Ashari remember. And then she was gone again, leaving Earth with a legacy and a responsibility. Caleb's burden. Caleb tried to step out of the spotlight. He hadn't asked for this, didn't want to be a symbol. But it was too late. His name had become a rallying cry across the colonies. To millions. He was a reminder that a single act of kindness could shift the stars. To Earth's leadership. He was a diplomatic miracle and a threat. They weren't sure whether to promote him, silence him, or simply watch him. But Caleb didn't care. The only thing he did care about was what the seed had started. He watched barren worlds bloom. He read reports of plagues being eradicated by the seed's offshoots. He visited outposts that had once been barely surviving, now lush, green, self-sufficient, and he realized something else. Humanity was changing not just physically, but philosophically. For the first time in centuries, people looked outward not with conquest in mind, but curiosity. They wanted to explore, not to dominate, but to share. Cultural centers grew, not weapons factories. Schools taught Alira's story alongside Earth's great turning points. Humanity wasn't perfect, but now they had proof that someone out there had judged them worthy of something incredible. And that knowledge changed people. What the galaxy saw. To the rest of the galaxy, however, the meaning was even more profound and terrifying. The Ashari were more than powerful. They were moral. They acted slowly, decisively, and only when an event shook them to their core. For them to emerge now and for them to favor a young, war-scarred species like humanity implied something deeper. Maybe, just maybe, the humans weren't just another race in a crowded galaxy. Maybe they were being prepared for something greater. Empires began reevaluating their postures toward Earth. Galactic criminals avoided Terran borders. Even the great ruling blocs, the Tharn Dominion, the Vexery Pact, softened their language. Not because they feared Earth's military, but because they feared what might be watching over them, because the last time the Ashari had intervened, 4 empires had vanished in silence. Now, the humans were no longer a curiosity. They were a warning, marked and changed forever. Earth didn't know what the future held, but it was clear their place in the galaxy had shifted. Where once they had clawed their way into relevance through war and survival, they now held a different kind of power, the kind that came from being remembered. Not for what they took, but for what they gave. Not for strength, but for mercy. And that all began with one man in one forgotten outpost, unchaining a stranger in the dust. Years passed. The world changed not through conquest, but through kindness. The seed of Sifin, the Ashari's miraculous gift, had continued to quietly transform humanity's future. Its self-replicating systems were carefully studied, duplicated, with permission and respectfully distributed under strict ethical guidelines. It was never exploited, never commercialized, never used for war. Instead, the seed was used to heal. Barren colonies became green worlds. Deserts turned into forests. Cities once choked by pollution were restored to ecosystems. The seed's ability to purify water, renew soil, and enhance life led to the end of hunger, the collapse of pharmaceutical monopolies, and a complete shift in human development goals. For the first time in recorded history, progress and peace walked hand in hand, and at the center of it all, reluctantly, was Caleb Ward. A quiet legacy. Caleb had no interest in politics or fame. Despite being the man who had unlocked the Ashari, as the press called it, he refused all titles, medals, and wealth. He turned down government positions, research chairs, and even offered to relinquish his clearance. All he wanted was quiet. He retired from military service 2 years after Alira's second visit. He settled far from the spotlight on a small, restored earth farm in the Appalachian Highlands. Ironically, it was land that had been reclaimed using seed-grown biograss and eco-trees. A gift, indirectly, from the same alien woman he'd once rescued. But Caleb couldn't completely escape history. Pilgrims came to see him, not tourists, but those who were inspired. Scholars, teachers, orphans, soldiers with guilt in their eyes. They all asked the same thing. Why did you do it? And Caleb always answered the same way. Because it was the right thing to do. She was chained. She needed help. That's all. Illyra's final visit one evening, long after the galaxy had accepted Earth's place among the favored, a ship appeared above Caleb's home. No sound, no comes, no alarms, just a shadow passing across the stars, and then a soft hum as it landed beyond the tree line. She stepped out, unchanged. Illyra, radiant as ever, but softer now. Her ceremonial armor was gone, replaced by a flowing garment of woven crystal and light. She looked less like a warrior and more like a messenger of peace. They sat together on his porch beneath Earth's twin moons. No guards, no weapons. Just two people, years older, but tied by a moment neither could forget. You still live simply, she said with a warm smile. Caleb shrugged. Can't say I needed much more. Turns out peace doesn't come from big cities or clean labs. It comes from quiet, she nodded. Your people have done well. The seed grows with harmony, and harmony grows with humility. Then her gaze turned serious. But there is more. She told him then of what the Asari truly were, not just a race, but a network of civilizations, custodians of forgotten wisdom, watchers of moral balance. They had intervened in the galaxy's history only 3 times in the last 10,000 cycles. Once, to stop an extinction event. Once, to end an empire built on slavery. And now to reward a single act of mercy. You changed us too, she sighed quietly. We had grown distant, cold, detached, watching civilizations destroy themselves and calling it fate. But your choice reminded us of what we once stood for. The Ashari had begun to re-emerge slowly, cautiously. Not to rule, but to guide. Other young civilizations would be watched now, not for their weapons, but their compassion. Seeds might be planted elsewhere. And Earth, by proving its potential, had become a quiet beacon. Then she offered him something he hadn't expected. You may come with me, Caleb, as an observer, as a teacher. Not to lead, never that, but to witness what your choice has sparked. Caleb paused for a long time. The stars above shimmered. The trees whispered in the wind. And beside him sat the woman whose freedom had changed the fate of worlds. He looked at her, smiled, and said, Let me finish one more harvest. Then we'll see where the stars lead. A new human myth. Caleb Ward became a legend, not because he fought a war, but because he chose not to. The story of the man who freed an alien prisoner and was rewarded with a gift that healed worlds became one of humanity's most treasured tales, taught in schools, etched into monuments, told not with fanfare, but with reverence, because it reminded everyone of a simple human truth. Greatness doesn't come from strength. It comes from compassion. Sometimes, all it takes to change the galaxy is one man choosing to unchain another.